Last year, let me just start over. I'm Shelley Knight. I'm on the board of the state board, and I have the portfolio of programs. And last year at convention, 3 programs were approved at the state level. And that's what we're here to give you a heads up on today. LEAP programs are an essential part of our mission. They're the grassroots way of getting our priorities and adopting our positions. So this graphic shows you an abbreviated part of the process. It all starts at program planning, which is done every year at every local league. During on odd number years, local leagues can propose state programs. Even number years like this, we can propose things to national. So last year in 2023, there were 3 programs proposed, 2 studies and an education project. Then those went through a committee process, and at convention, they were all adopted. After that, the study will come back to local leagues when it's done to go through the consensus process. And the consensus process is where local league members read the materials and answer questions. Those questions will be determinative of a position. Do we want to take a position on this issue? And if so, what should it be? Then that goes back to the following year's convention, and the position can be adopted and put in our action program of action. So, and then used for advocacy. So right now, we are kind of in the middle of this draft, and local leagues will be getting more later this year. And to keep you up to date on that, they're going to each talk about their project or study and tell you what's happening with that. So first up is Susan Martin with the immigration study. Karen Tvedt is going to talk about the elder care study, and Kit Muehlman will be talking about the multi-member district education process. So,
and we'll take questions at the end.
And we'll have questions at the end.
Right. Great. Shelley, thank you. Our project started off being called Immigration and Immigrant Integration. And then we realized that didn't quite capture what we're doing. And so we've changed the name of the study to Welcoming Immigrants to Washington State. And this is not just newcomers, but also immigrants who have been in the state for a while, but may not necessarily feel welcomed in the state. Okay, quick background on why this is important, and partly it's because of what's happening with immigration in Washington State. And I'm not going to go through all of these statistics, but suffice to say that there are more than 1 million immigrants in Washington State, and they count for about 15% of the population, but almost the same percentage of Washingtonians are native-born U.S. citizens with at least 1 immigrant parent. So we're talking really about 25% of the population. Most have legal status, but a significant minority, about a quarter of them are undocumented or without authorization to reside or work in the state. And about half are naturalized citizens, and that's an important issue for the league to know about and know what their needs are, and particularly their engagement with civics education, naturalization, voting, etc. And they're disproportionately at the very high end of the skill level of Washington workers, but also at the low end. So we have this sort of U-shaped curve on it. Part of the rationale, and again, I won't go through this, is that, and part of my personal reason for wanting to do this here is that Washington is a model for many other states. We've been the first to do a whole lot of things that are focused on welcoming immigrants of all statuses and protecting them in the state. And so this gives us an opportunity to look at what are the laws that have been passed over the last, maybe 20 years since there started to be a number of them, but also then to see the extent to which these are being implemented and what the impact is of having programs, laws that are welcoming, but not necessarily being implemented in a way that's welcoming. So we're looking at the difference between what is legal and what is practical in terms of the state. And then also looking at what more can be done and to help immigrants who are here and going to be here for a long time, not only feel welcome, but also helped in their process of integrating into the society. And we think that our results will be very useful for other states, and hope that perhaps we can follow the local news pattern and maybe go for concurrence to make it a US policy. I always do that. We have a multi-method process going on, reviewing the census data on immigrants in the country and the analysis of that census data. We're looking at legislation, regulations. We're starting and now have commenced doing interviews across the state with stakeholders, public officials. Yesterday, I went to the detention center in Tacoma to talk with the detainees about what is happening to them and what they're doing, with one of the other members of the study committee who goes there. The day before, we talked to the ombudsman's office that are overseeing the detention system to find out what they're doing to make sure that GEO, the company that runs the detention center, is doing what it's supposed to do and providing for the needs of the detainees. So that's part of beginning a discussion with immigrants themselves about what their needs are, whether they're getting access to the needs, talking with elected officials, current and former ones. And importantly, we've done a survey of local leagues, and we've had about 14 of the leagues respond to the survey. I'm hoping that we can get more to respond. And that's primarily on the civic engagement to find out, how many are doing what types of services, whether it's going to naturalization ceremonies in order to give out do voter registration there, things of that sort. Are there questions about immigrants and immigration in their voter forums? Things, we have a whole set of questions which will help us think about what more can be done within the league on these issues. Our next steps are to conclude our open-ended interviews with stakeholders and immigrants. We need to continually update the census information that we're getting. We've been doing and continue to do a literature review. We have to do more analysis of the local league data We now have compiled the 14 or so responses and trying to understand what are the patterns where and what more can be done by the leagues themselves. One of the disappointing set of responses were with regard to outreach to try to include naturalized citizens in the league. Now, very similar to the discussion we had over lunch on that in terms of some of the barriers. But if you want a more diverse representation, then you have to think about outreach to immigrants in this respect. And then we're analyzing as we go on, both the qualitative and the quantitative data that we're collecting. And then we'll go through the process that Shelley described in terms of once we have a report of going through the consensus system on it. And so we're really looking for input from across the state. We're hoping to do some site visits in a variety of counties after we finish the interviews that we're doing with the statewide organizations. We have interviews set up already with the offices in the state government that deal with immigration issues, and also with the major nonprofits that are working with immigrants, both on services and on rights. I think we're going to take questions at the end just so that everybody has the chance to talk, but I assume my 10 minutes is pretty much up. I'll defer to the others then. I think I'm the
I have just a technical thing. Could we minimize the,
Yes.
when we're seeing as that's on top of our slide.
Yeah, I'll move it.
Can you minimize?
I don't know how
I
to
know
do
how to
this.
do it. Oh, he definitely knows how to do it.
How do you
I mean, I
minimize?
usually just click things until it goes away if you know the specific. but,
Yeah.
It's not going away, so.
Click this one.
There.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Far
click
left
the last.
I did.
Yeah, there we go.
So we won't see the people. I thought we were trying to get rid of this.
Yeah, I'd like to get rid of that too.
I don't know if there's a way to get rid of that.
How about more? Hit more.
I know you can move it around, but
Make sure you-
Up top was fine.
I don't think you can get rid of it.
Does that come out of my time?
Yeah, let's just move on.
Yeah,
I'll keep it on top. Okay. All right, Karen, you're on.
Okay. So it's great to be here to talk about where we are with the elder caregiving study. The reason for this quote is it's one we've come back to as we've done this study. It's attributed to Rosalind Carter. In her book, she attributes it to somebody else, but she doesn't say who. So there are only 4 kinds of people in this world. Those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. And, you know, as we've been involved with the study, it's been clear that all of us on this one study group have experienced our own issues with caregiving for elders. I run into I go to Tai Chi, and one of the people who's in Tai Chi is going to miss the next day because he doesn't have a caregiver for his phone. And it seems like when you open your eyes to this, it's just everywhere, that people are really struggling. I'm not going to go into this slide. This is just some of the statistics. We did a handout from our slides. I don't know if you can read them, but we tried. These are the statistics we used a year ago when we made the case for the study. And everything we've learned reinforces the statistics we use. What seems clear is with the aging of the baby boomers, smaller families, more people living alone, caregiver shortages, we have a crisis in caregiving right now that's only going to get worse over the next couple of decades. Caregiving is incredibly costly. $137,000 on average a year for a semi-private nursing room. And most seniors are not prepared and don't have the resources to pay for care. And a lot of people have the misconception that Medicare pays for long-term. It doesn't. And I guess I have to make a pitch for no on I-2124, which is the state's, am I on Sam's ground? Are you making a face at me? Take a look carefully at 2124, which is the initiative that would make the state's long-term care plan voluntary. And the concern about that initiative is if you make it voluntary, then it really affects its financial feasibility. That's all I'll say. And Medicare is our primary funder of long-term care nationally and in this state. And in order to be eligible for Medicare, Medicaid, you have to spend down your assets to $2,000. And if you have a home, it makes your home subject to a lien and estate recovery. Okay, you want to go to the next one? We have had a wonderful core group. I love this core group. And I'm going to tell Dick Halverson and Jody, Jody's already standing there, 2 of our 6 core group members. Mary Ellers has helped, and a number of other people have helped as interviewers, reviewers, looking for themes, giving us feedback. And so we're looking for additional people to play that role. Our process is not so different from the immigration study. We're doing analysis of state and national literature and data. We've done 32 qualitative interviews with elders, family caregivers, and paid caregivers. And we were conscious about starting with the people who are experiencing the issues rather than going to the professionals. We wanted to hear from families what they were experiencing. And we learned a lot that now is helping us as we're doing interviews with professional stakeholders in the field. And for instance, this next Monday, we're going to meet for 2 hours, and 1 hour will be devoted to the person with the state who's the program manager for family and community long-term care. So, and then we're meeting with Dana Allard-Webb, and we're going to be asking the questions that have come up in our interviews. You want to go to the next one? I really want to focus on this, about what we're learning from our research. And this is what we got from our interviews, what we're getting from professionals so far. Elders and their families are facing a lot of challenges in negotiating the system. Not only getting information about where to turn, but how to negotiate a complex system at both the state and local level. It's hard to figure the system out. And in fact, there are professions that have developed to negotiate and help families through that process, and legal experts who help you figure out the estate recovery issues. The system works better for the very poor who are eligible for Medicaid for long-term care, and for the well-off who can pay for themselves. Those of us in the middle are the ones that are struggling. Because if you have a family member go into nursing care, it's not gonna take very long to go through the assets, and then you're gonna be looking toward Medicaid and state recovery and all of those issues. Most elders want to remain in their home, try to take the car keys away, you know? My kids are gonna have that. And yet we're facing renewed and more challenges of obesity, diabetes, housing issues, access to healthcare. So that despite wanting to be independent, elders are facing extraordinary challenges, and only a few percent have long-term insurance. That's been a surprise to me. How few people have long-term care insurance. Washington's system relies heavily on family caregivers, and that was a public policy choice that was made a couple of decades ago to begin shifting resources from nursing home care to home, family, and community-based services. And we heard from a lot of family caregivers that they're really struggling. That, you know, Dick talked about a neighbor where the son had to move to take care of his parents. He and his wife are delaying having a child because they can't do it all. And those are the kinds of stories you hear. People are really stretched. And one of the things that we've heard over and over is the need for respite care. There's some respite care, but not nearly enough. And then finally, the demographics are such that even though we have unionized professional caregivers through SEIU in Washington State, so they're getting paid a little better than they have in the past. What we heard was, you know, the work is pretty unstable. The person you're caring for goes into the hospital. You lose your income and you lose your medical care, because if you don't work at least 80 hours in a month, you lose your medical care. And what we saw, and I'm going to read this because I'm not going to remember it. The ratio of elders 75 and older to people 25 to 54 will be 4 to 1 in 2030. By 2040, it's going to be 3 to 1. And so that's our pool of caregivers.
So there's 4 times the number of people over 70.
No, 4 times the people who are in the working age, to every elder. I'm sorry, I said that. I said that backwards, but it's still pretty daunting, you know, 3 to 1 elder, 4 to 1 elder. Okay, let's go to, and so we're doing pretty well with the top row of boxes. In fact, we've started figuring out our outline and writing sections. Jody wrote a section on models of, you know, around the world, and that will probably be at least part of in our report. And then what I want to just say something is about timeline, because this affects locally. We're hoping that we'll be done writing and through the technical review committee, reviewers, by the end of September. We hope the consensus process will be between October and mid-February. So that's the time local leagues need to be thinking about scheduling time for the consensus meeting. And then from mid-February to mid-March, we'll revise the report and then work with the state board on positions. And so in conclusion, we really would like to know if you want to know more about this study. And we're anticipating wanting to support local leagues in the consensus process, so let us know how we can support you. Would it be helpful to do a statewide forum? Do you want us to have the capacity to come out and talk to your leagues? Just let us know how we can be helpful. Thank you.
All right, the next up is Kit. Do you want me to run it or do you?
Would you like me to do it? Would you
Well,
like me to do
it doesn't matter to me,
If you do it, that'd be great.
okay?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Tvedt and Kit Muehlman, and this might be a good time if you want to stand up and stretch for a little bit. You've been sitting for half an hour. And you can get permission to stretch. Oh, yeah, I can stand, I got my sling off because I could. Don't hand me anything heavy, so it's great. Okay, keep stretching as long as you want. So I'm Tvedt Muehlman, and I'm working with our multi-member district education project, which was approved last summer at the convention, where I learned a lot about the way league does things and about bias and perceived bias. And I continue learning. It was tough. I continue learning. And thank you, Shelley, for your mentorship. I appreciate that. So next slide. What is a multi-member district? So a multi-member district is a district that has more than one representative. And usually 3 or 5 or 7. And it contrasts to what we're used to, which is a single member district that elects one representative. So next slide. Gonna go fast. So Port Angeles, Washington is an example of a multi-member district. It has 7 representatives. I don't know if you can see the edge of the city here. So
It's
all
the
the,
white.
everyone who lives in here elects, votes
Sorry.
for each representatives. There's 7 seats. And that means that the candidates can live anywhere in the district and run for a city council. And there's no need to draw district lines. And every council member needs the largest block of the city's votes. And that also means that while there's no need to draw districts, there's no opportunity to draw a minority majority district and any minority or it could be even a political minority or it doesn't have to be a racial minority, doesn't necessarily get representation. And a common solution is to draw minority districts, but the minority people, if they're not living in the compact area, it won't help. So next slide is Yakima. Yakima has 7 city council districts, and each district elects 1 city council member. So those are single member districts. And so in this case, the way the district lines are drawn becomes very important. So the way the map makers draw the lines can affect who gets elected. And next slide. City of Portland. So Portland, Oregon has made a major overhaul of their city government. They'll be voting for 12 council members. They've got 4 districts, 3 council members each. And in contrast with the Port Angeles, each Portland district will elect their 3 council members using a proportional voting method. And when a proportional voting method is used, drawing districts is less contentious. So next slide. So why should we learn about multi-member districts? So more jurisdictions are talking about using multi-member districts. And as the league is a large voting advocacy group, it's worth learning about it. Next slide. Another reason that it's important to learn about multi-member districts is the the state Supreme Court decision from last summer, Portugal versus Franklin. And in the ruling, the Supreme Court judges ruled that jurisdictions can change to proportional and semi-proportional voting methods to comply with the Washington Voting Rights Act.
And all of these alternative voting methods require multi-member districts. And next slide. Where are multi-member districts used? So many modern democracies, including Australia, Ireland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Malta, Spain, and South Africa, use multi-member districts. And in the United States, Cambridge, Massachusetts, East Point, Michigan, Arden, Delaware, Portland, Oregon, and Albany, California use multi-member districts. So what would change? What would change? It really greatly depends on the voting method that you use. And there are three big categories. There are a lot of different voting methods. The big categories are non-proportional methods, like Port Angeles uses. The largest block of voters elects all the representatives. The semi-proportional voting methods, the minority views get some representation. And with proportional methods, there's representation for most voters. So representation is proportional. I'm missing my verb. Okay. So next slide. What is proportional voting method? What does it do? So if in this case, we have a district, it's a multi-member district, because they're going to elect 5 representatives. So we've got this many purple voters and some light orange voters and some dark orange voters and some green voters. If this were a single member district and they were electing 1 representative, it would be purple and everyone else would just have to hope somebody from another district could represent them. In this case, they've got 5 representatives proportionally. So purple gets 2, this light orange gets 2, the dark orange gets 1, and green isn't really big enough to get a representative. So if a community of interest is dispersed throughout a district, this helps them get representation, because the district is not going to be drawn like this. They're all going to be all mixed up together. All right, next slide. This is a wonderful study. It's a study done in 2000 by the Washington State League. Got a copy of it on our table in the exhibit room. We'll be using some material from this evaluation of major election methods. And next slide. After that study, the State League adopted a position which supports adoption of election methods that produce proportional representation when electing representative government bodies such as councils, legislations, and Congress. And proportional voting methods require multi-member districts. And so there's a fascinating history of multi-member districts in the United States, especially in the like 1920s, 30s, and 40s. New York City used multi-member districts from 1937 to 47, and they they ended up with 6 parties, and then it was repealed. Let's see, it's a great story, but we'll go into more detail in longer presentations. So I'll say the reason that the repealers said they wanted to repeal it was because they had elected a representative from the Communist Party. However, it might not have been the reason. Okay. So we, at this point, are looking for questions. I hope you have questions. We're collecting questions so that we know what people want to learn. And here's the address. You can write to us. You can ask them now. We have flyers at the table too with our address on them. And in the near future, we'll look for a webpage on the project.
You want to mention September?
September 10th. Thank you. Yes, we've got September 10th on the calendar to do a presentation to League of their education project. Yeah,
Okay.
on Zoom. Yeah. Okay,
All
thank you.
So
right.
we have about 10 minutes. Good job,
Right.
everybody. We have 10 minutes for questions. Mary?
I have questions for immigration and I have some for you as well. So is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay, so immigration, what kind of questions were you asking the immigrants, since that's actually your customer? Because, you know, I don't really care what the people serving the immigrants have to say. I want to know what the immigrants are saying.
Yeah, but we're looking at 4 different indices, in terms of the welcoming or the integration of immigrants. First is, do they have economic opportunities? You know, so are people with a PhD stuck in jobs that are well beneath their skill level because they are facing problems of discrimination of one or another? Yeah, that would be that type of thing. But do they have access to skills training programs? Are they able to invest money in things that will rebound to their own economic success?
I mean, like houses?
That's part of it, that actually comes under another area.
Do you have a checklist of questions you're asking?
Yeah, we have a whole interview protocol, and depending on the who we're interviewing, we do things. Second one is on language acquisition. You know, there are enough adult education programs for immigrants who want to learn English. How are the school systems dealing with newcomer coming students who don't speak English, things of that sort. The third is on social integration, and that's where housing issues come up. You know, not just do they have access to buying houses, but are they in safe neighborhoods? And we're looking at that against a lot of different issues. And then the fourth is civic engagement. And that's the one I talked about most during the presentation, but it's one of the 4 main areas. And we're planning, but we're talking in the upcoming weeks with some of the umbrella organizations that provide services to immigrants, most of which are immigrant-led or refugee-led organizations. So they themselves are, you know, come through that process and are now providing services to others. But we're asking them, because they're more trusted by the community than we would be, if they will organize groups of immigrants to talk with us. So that's how we got into the detention center, was with a group in Tacoma that go into the detention centers every week and talk with the detainees about what their needs are and what they're doing. And because we were coming in through that entryway, we were able to talk to them in a way that we couldn't if we had just done it ourselves.
Thank you. And then, Karen, the question you said, I thought you asked, how can we get the information out to the leagues or something? My suggestion on that is, in most of the, at least used to be, the leagues would put out a monthly newsletter to their members. You know, some kind of a one to 2 page summary of the study in advance so that it can go into their newsletter. I mean, they're always looking for subject matter for their newsletter. And then a lot of times they want the questions that you're looking for. And frequently, I mean, we used to get these from Seattle King County. They give us a blurb, you read it, the questions were there, you answer the questions in the unit meeting. I mean, this has to be common. I don't think they do it as much as they used to, but I think part of it is because they don't get the content. So I think most of the leagues are looking for that kind of content, but you may have to coordinate in advance, get a slot in the newsletter to see what everyone's looking for.
Okay, good suggestion. Other questions?
So for the immigration study, when will consensus process come to the local league?
Yeah, we're running a little bit behind the elder care program, and I think partly because of the nature of the study, but also I think it'll stagger it a little bit if you're not having to, that's what happened the last time. So I would say it'd be around November. that
So
We'll be going into consensus.
2 years ago, we had 2 studies come up about the same time. And it was surprised local leagues because it has to go to local leagues and local leagues have to have a meeting. So scheduling, we want to give as much notice this year as possible. I anticipate in the fall, we will put on a statewide meeting to get everybody ready for this and walk through the process, because the consensus process can be a little complicated. You can't do it by email. It has to be a discussion. People have to read the studies. So it hit in 2022, it hit local leagues, and there was at the same time as program planning and the holidays. So we're gonna try to keep you all apprised along the way and get it scheduled. So we know KIT's project, which isn't gonna require a consensus, will have some kind of rollout in September. And then we'll get to the studies, which are a little more involved.
You had a question?
So I have one for you and one for you. So one for you is about you didn't mention if there's a shortage of workers to provide the care and the training, because my experience with a couple of situations is that, especially in rural areas, oversight, that somebody might be being paid, but they don't really show up, and even finding them is very difficult. And a lot of people do want to stay in their homes, but is there really enough, are there really workers being trained to do that? And are they treated well enough to remain?
It's an excellent point. We have, if you look at the projections, there aren't enough workers now. And with the aging of the baby boomers. And that was the point of the statistic I garbled, was that, you know, it's going to become more and more of a challenge. In addition to that, we have heard that there are issues in people who want to be caregivers or existing caregivers and getting training and getting certification. And that'll be one of the things we're going to be trying to impact. What are the bureaucratic impediments? And then what are some of the things that are being done here and elsewhere to bring more people into the field and make the job rewarding? I heard over and over from caregivers, we're professionals, but we're not treated like professionals. And so I think that's one of the things that needs to change.
Yeah, and I can just say from the immigration point of view on that very issue, which is something we're also looking at, but from the studies that I've done before, that the chances are that a lot of the caregivers, immigrant caregivers, may be nurses that are certified, but they're not certified in the US. So they end up doing caregiving, but they're treated really badly.
Yeah, and the population of caregivers in this country is largely immigrant, women of color.
So,
Another thing we've run into is if the person that needs the caregiving lives in a wealthier community, the caregivers have to commute a long ways because they can't afford to live in that area. And I mean, and that's a real common problem, especially, and you mentioned the rural areas, they have problems in the cities too, because the caregivers, you know, but they have to come from Motley Terrace to, you know, because they can afford to live in Motley Terrace, but they can't afford to live in Seattle or any of the coastal areas, you know, Edmonds or Shoreline or anything like that.
So
how do you identify them? Yeah, I did actually have one for the multi-member.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So so it's like a lot of the countries you listed, it seems like you had talked about multi-member and proportional representation sort of in the same, so it's the same. And yet your presentation doesn't really address parties. I see the lead as nonpartisan, but not non-party. And it's, you know, for proportional representation, it seems like you actually have to define parties in order to say how many votes did somebody get and how many representatives did they have.
So your question might be, how would multi-member districts affect parties?
Well, you know, Ireland, Norway, Sweden, all of those places, their proportional representation is based on parties. Lots of parties. Lots of parties. Like multi parties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to answer that, Cindy?
Well, I was gonna say, we were just, for sharing a room, so we were just talking about, Sightline did an interview with Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is one of the,
Oh, yeah.
cities that have done proportional representation since the 1940s. They never stopped. And what they do is, they were talking to a city council member who's running under that. And, they use, slates of candidates. And so like, nonprofit advocacy groups that can endorse candidates would endorse a slate saying, we recommend you rank 1, 2, 3 like this. And the candidates there are running on issues like housing and rent control and, you know, environmental things. So they're running on issues. So the topic is issues, not what party they belong
I'm
to.
gonna have to
We-
interrupt.
we-
There's another group of folks.
Yeah.
Needing to get in.
Can we take
But
the
that's a
very
great
last
Great
question?
question.
Wait for Shelley.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I can ask.
You know what I would suggest? We're gonna be here. Come talk to us.
Yeah, we have.
Please do. Thank you all.